Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show where it's about TV shows that are dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Devils. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, I think it's interesting how this episode kind of bounces back and forth between the past, because it starts in 2006, and obviously, bouncing back between then and present day, and I thought it was kind of interesting, as like you in the past where you saw Massimo and Dominic's relationship was getting better. Obviously, present day, you see it kind of deteriorating. And so I think that's just kind of an interesting contrast. Because we also learned that him and his team have been together for a while. Because obviously, we weren't seeing Massimo at the beginning, of him working at NYL. But this was because he had been working there like a couple years or whatever, based on what Ed was saying. But this is basically 2006 when he had the big boom where it's he had real success because basically he went to a party with his team, and obviously it was a party that Carrie was throwing, and obviously a lot of artist friends and stuff like that. And it's she was getting her art shown at a place or whatever. So some people had taken interest in it. They were kind of snooty people, so she was like, I didn't really care about it, but they love my art, so I love them, And even her and Massimo got matching tattoos. But it starts being that thing of, and Massimo's kind of talked about it a little bit, I think, because of the background, because of his upbringing, obviously probably not having the, richest, upbringing, probably came, from maybe a poor household, because like he had told Ed in the first episode, I started at the bottom, all there is left is to go up, Whereas Ed's, it's you can only go down. I think it's kind of supposed to be that thing of you come from a privileged situation where you're well off, you grew up well off, and you continue to be even more well off. I started off poor, and I've worked my way up to the top. I think that, that's how I always, kept interpreting that. But, obviously Massimo, right at the party and everything, he's focused more on work and stuff like that. He brings this to work. He ends up saying oh, we need to do this particular move. Ed was super against it. So that's interesting, too, to know that obviously him and Ed, their back and forth goes back and forth a while back. So that means Ed's probably had it out for Massimo for years, just because that was his probably number one competition, because it's oh, this young buck want to come up and tell me that. Once again, it's you've only been working here a couple years, because the decision Massimo wanted to make would have cost the company $1 billion, but Massimo's if we don't do this, it's going to be $10 billion later on down the road, But when the time came for it, Dominic went with Massimo's decision to sell, and obviously it paid off big time. But even Ed's well, congratulations, you were 100% right. He's now whether that's because you're actually skilled and know what you're doing, or whether you're just lucky, he kind of chalked it up to just being lucky. Just once again, that kind of spitting in Massimo's face. So once again, we see kind of where that bad blood began. But obviously, we find out also that Carrie ended up overdosing. Massimo, she was trying to call Massimo, but he didn't pick up. And she said this interesting line that basically their love, it's this interesting thing of their love. It's when he's full, she's empty. So I think that's supposed to kind of represent the thing of it's just, when life kind of works out for you, it kind of works shitty for me. It's just kind of when you're at your high, I'm at my low. It's just kind of that's how she's basically saying that's almost how the relationship almost works. And I thought that was so interesting. Or maybe it's just, or maybe more specifically, it's just kind of you're kind of getting filled up by life in general. Me, just life is kind of tearing me down, because obviously the people she thought was going to take her art and look, kind of show it off and stuff like that, chose not to. So it just kind of put her in a bad place. And I think she ended up overdosing, which now makes that situation even more tragic, because Massimo had been in this exact same situation before when he was with Carrie and she was unconscious, because they had to put her in a coma, or she was in a coma from everything present day. And so it probably had to be, it was probably looking back to, what was it, 5 years ago, obviously, because that was in 2006 and, 2011, now present day in the story and stuff like that. So it probably had to be staring at a mirror, because it's we're in that same situation. It's not the exact same, because at least Carrie was away and then we were able to pump her stomach. But when it was all said and done, we skipped to 2 years later. It's 2008. And obviously Massimo's at a party. He brings Carrie along, but it's that higher class party that Carrie starts feeling a little uncomfortable, because it's she's I dressed all serious, but even everyone else here is dressed even more seriously. So it's a lot of introductions. Dominic trying to introduce the right people. We get introduced to John and everything, his son. And then we find out, obviously, this is where it's like, oh yeah, like he's going to Afghanistan and everything. And him saying, like, you know, it's like, oh, well, whatever the work is that we're going to do, we're going to get it done, basically. And even Dominic being like, oh, they'll get Osama bin Laden, and then he'll come right back. And his mom, you know, Nina was just more so like, I just want you to come back. Like, I don't even care what your mission is, just, like, come back. Let that be the priority. But sadly, the party wasn't all great, especially for Carrie, because obviously, like, she's, you know, a couple months sober, and she's even saying, like, oh, I'm off the pill, we can have a baby. We never really got to see how far that conversation was going to go before they got interrupted. But she's in the bathroom, and then all these other ladies are talking mad shit. One of said ladies is Ed's wife, Miss Stewart, and it's like, oh, that sucks. I mean, it's almost like, I don't know what it is. I don't know if irony would be the right word. I mean, it's not a good thing to say. I'm not trying. It's just interesting. Like, you're so high and mighty, and you're just looking down on somebody, and just not saying like she deserved it. It's karma or anything, but there's just some level of it. It's just kind of like, oh, you were kind of an asshole because, and it's because they're in this powerful position. They think they're better than her and everything like that, you know. And they were talking mad shit. And even when they saw that she was in there, they were just kind of had this look like, oh, she's running away. Oh, sorry, did we go too far? It's like, you suck, you know, as human beings. But it's even more sad when you actually break it down, because obviously she thinks that he's the one that killed her husband. So it's just interesting, like, you know, his wife being dead now, and just, I don't know, like, it's a situation where you could read too much into it, just like how things kind of worked out in both of their cases. But when it's all said and done, Carrie, like, started drinking and just kind of got really effed up at the party. Because the only person that was really nice to her was Nina. But obviously for her, you know, she kind of makes a scene and kind of embarrasses Massimo in front of a whole bunch of, you know, powerful people that, you know, it's like, oh, that Dominic is introducing him to. Because Dominic had made a point, like, oh, do you know what we do at this bank? And it's like, oh, we do. It's like, no, we basically sell trust, basically, that people have trust to put their money with us to do, you know, that's kind of like what they sell. And it's like, oh, he's like, so what's that supposed to be? He's like, is that supposed to be about Carrie? And he was like, you know, what it's like, basically the whole conversation is what's best for her, because, and now it also puts it in an interesting perspective, because it's like Dominic is the one that kind of put it in his head that, like, hey, maybe you should leave your wife behind, maybe you two being together, like, what you want from life and what she wants, you're at completely different stages of your life. And even Nina plays into that a little bit too, being like, you want Massimo to be happy, then, like, you know, maybe if you love him, like, you know, it's that thing of, like, if you really love someone, you'll let them go, and if it's meant to be, they'll come back to you. Like, that whole thing, it was kind of similar to that. And it seems like Carrie kind of took it to heart. It seems like she started a fight with Massimo just so they could break up. Or maybe she was still, because he was just saying, like, oh, you're drunk or whatever, but she's like, oh, these are your people. She's like, I thought you weren't a part of this world, but now I find out this is your world, because this is where you want to be. You're so comfortable here. Basically, it's like these people who are just, like, rich and powerful and living this high life. Like, she's like, she thought Massimo wasn't one of those people, but it's like, this is where you are. Like, you strive so hard to be one of them. You are one of them, aren't you? This is where you belong. This is actually where you're happiest, you know. And he's like, oh, I'd be better off without you. And she leaves. And it seems like that's the last time they saw each other. It's like, it's sad. I mean, it's sad that their relationship ended on such a, you know, sour note. And because now in retrospect, that means, like, obviously when he saw her again in episode 1 was the first time he'd seen her in 3 years, and he never actually had a chance. He never got a chance to actually talk to her. He never got a chance to apologize. That's the, you know, saddest thing about it. Once again, it's like, that's why this whole Carrie thing hits him so hard. It's actually kind of an interesting conversation, because Dominic says it later on, like, you just need someone to be angry at. It's like, because to be fair, what went down between him and Carrie was, well, between them, that was kind of on him. And it's like, he wants to blame everyone else for, like, the fact is that he didn't have time, you know. It's like she was brought in here to kind of sabotage things that she was meant to be, like, something to kind of throw him off his game and stuff like that, something to be used against him. So it has this element of, like, you know, he resents whoever put her in this position. And it's also like, because he likes to believe, like, oh, he wants to believe or thinks that someone killed her, made it look like an overdose. So all that compounded, he just Dominic's almost making it seem like you need someone to blame. I'm not the enemy here. He made that clear before, but yeah. At the same time, like it is 2008, so there's all the financial crisis going on. Obviously, it hitting like the U.S. and obviously like Massimo and his team tried to short like some stuff with the U.S. because he's like, that's what Dominic raised me to do, trained me to do, to go after the weakest, and the U.S. is the weakest now. Because obviously, like, to save this whole situation, Dominic was suggesting that basically they screw over Europe, and it's just kind of like, no, we can't do that. But it's like, to ensure everything's okay. But regardless, the fact of the matter is Dominic was telling Massimo, you don't do that. I told you. It's actually interesting because the way Dominic was talking to him is the way Massimo kind of talked to his team last episode when they did shit behind his back. It's actually interesting how that kind of came full circle like that. I didn't even think about that until just now. But obviously at the same time, Dominic got news about John, and obviously Nina was devastated, but it's that whole conversation about like, it's like, do you know why John signed him in the first place? He's like Dominic's thought was 9/11 because he wanted to serve his country and do, like what other people his age would want to do. And it's like, no, he did it because he felt like you would never feel like he was good enough, so kind of turning it on Dominic. We already kind of, Nina had even made that clear kind of present day. That's kind of how she felt. And so that was kind of, it's kind of sad and a little unfair. You can tell, like, obviously it's just like, it's hitting and hurting Dominic because obviously he gets painted as the devil, and it's like, oh, so even the devil has feelings too, plenty of shows have kind of, showcased that, whether it be like, Lucifer, for example, that the devil isn't what you think he is necessarily, that, he has a heart just as much as anyone else has. So it's kind of a thing in that regard. So I thought that was kind of, interesting, but obviously like she calls Massimo takes her, to that place, and obviously for her it's like, she used to take John there, and he used to be happy because you see the seals and the mom would come there to have their pups. So I forgot what she said the exact reasons were, but it was all about a mom doing whatever she could to protect her children, and obviously, with everything that went down, like it hit, Nina a certain way, but when it was all said and done, her and Massimo, banged it out. And I was like, okay. So I kind of had a feeling like there was something between her and Massimo. And because even like Dominic later on, when Massimo and Dominic were looking for her, like he's like, oh yeah, like there's a place, like the cottage. I took her there once before. And Dominic had this look like, wait, what? Oh, so this is a place. Because it's like, oh, he also said like, oh, there's forget-me-nots here. It's like, yeah, she brings one here every year. And he was almost looking at her like, how you know about that? Because I guess maybe it's a ritual that he's like, only I should know about that. But the fact is, you know about that. Because we know, I mean, obviously over the course of the show so far, we've seen that obviously him and Nina have been in contact. Like they do kind of lean on each other from time to time. In particular, she leans on him. So it's interesting because obviously, like I said, present day, she's like going missing because she's with Ed's kids. But, like, she was supposed to drop them off at the pool, but she went somewhere else. Because it turns out today, present day, is John's birthday. And obviously she's not in the right state of mind. She's thinking about her son, how, the pain she's in, she's lost, And now you're kind of worried, like, maybe she might do something while she's with the kids because she just might not be in the right state of mind. It's actually interesting because, like, Sophia had stopped by Massimo's place, but then he gets a call from Dominic, and she's like, okay, and you just drop everything for him. He's like, yeah, this is something personal. But it's like, why do you continue working with the guy who basically ruined your life? It's like, you loved Carrie, didn't you? So it's like we know that he was behind the whole Carrie thing. So like, why are you still working with him? Why are you so willing to drop everything for him? To be fair, this isn't about him. This is about Nina, and that's because she's someone important to him. It's just, it ends up obviously, that being, Dominic's wife. It's just kind of a byproduct. But it's like, also there's the whole Chris situation. He showed up at Dominic's place, and it's like, oh, he showed him the video of Oliver messing with the VAR and everything, and it's like, oh yeah, this will get him, fired or whatever. Even later on being like, yeah, I've talked to some people, and it made it so that, like, even if he gets fired, it won't affect the bank and stuff like that. But he's like, yeah, now we finally know how Massimo, someone at his age, being so young, ended up getting a position he cheated. But like, Dominic didn't appreciate that. He's like, basically like, shut your damn mouth. You don't know the first thing there is about Massimo. Take this and bounce. And even Chris is like, what do you, but it's like, he's so willing to do whatever for even them being at the place that they are right now, he's still, it's that almost that sibling thing of like, I can talk shit about my sibling, but the moment you do, it's like no, fuck you. You don't get to talk about my sibling like that. It's that type of situation where Dominic is like, as it kind of made the comparison, Massimo is like a son to him. So it's like, you're not going to like tarnish my son's name. Don't you dare talk about him like you know him. He's a hard worker. He got here by being smart and doing all that he did, and I presented him these opportunities because of him being skilled. You don't know anything, Chris. Shut your... He got irritated by it. But when it was all said and done, though, luckily they did find Nina, and even Dominic was there. He was looking out at the water, but he heard the kids laughing, and he comes over, and like Nina's there with him, and he has this like sigh of relief because he almost thought like he probably thought the worst. But he's actually talking to Massimo, and he brings up something interesting, that when John signed up for the military, he'd actually talked to some contacts to make it so that John would be in non-combatant, like he'd be safe, that he'd get him a job, a position in the military that would make it so he wouldn't see battle. But the fact of the matter is John found out about it and got pissed and blocked it so that his dad couldn't help him. So he put himself in that position because, he didn't want to be in a situation where he felt like he was being protected by his dad. He wanted to show his dad up and be like, no, I can do this. I can stand on my own 2 feet. You don't see me as a man, but I am a man, And, even Massimo being like, why didn't you ever tell Nina? Like, she always felt like you never did enough to protect John. And he was like, yeah, but she was so angry she needed someone to blame. So he was like, if I had to make that sacrifice, I'll be that person, And so, him and Nina are actually talking. And for her, it's like, she's okay now because she's like, she realized, it finally sat in her mind, like, yes, I would never hear my son's voice again. Once again, it's only been like 3 years, so it's still, it's a situation where that wound is never going to completely go away, but it's still a relatively fresh enough wound because it has only been 3 years. Once again, I can't speak from that position. I'm not a father. I'm not a parent. I can never, fully grasp, where I am right now in my life. I cannot fully grasp that. Once again, it's that thing of you can sympathize, but you can never empathize type of situation. I always feel like I get those backwards, but I think that's exactly what I mean. But when it was all said and done, though, Nina was, her and Dominic hug, so it's like everything's good. And obviously, like, when they actually get back to his place, I thought was kind of interesting because Dominic was like, okay, so yeah, I know about the VAR and everything, you doing all this stuff. He also brings up the fact that he knew about Nina and Massimo. He's like, oh, you think I wouldn't know? The fact of the matter is my relationship with Nina is beyond sex. He's like, ironically enough, you did help fix our marriage. And then, Massimo's like, at the same time, you destroy mine. It's like, no. I didn't destroy your life or anything. I actually made it better. It's like I kept tabs on Nina and you found out I kept tabs on Carrie and everything with the lawyer and everything. It's like, yes, so that she would stay out of your life. He's like, no, it's like, no, you wanted, you can say all you want to, but you knew that woman was going to drag you down, that you would never have the career you wanted because if you stayed with Carrie, trying to make Massimo think like, once again, trying to make him be, it's like, oh, you're trying to blame me, but no, the one at fault here is you, because this is actually what you wanted. You wanted that career, and you knew being with her would jeopardize that. Sadly, she kind of felt the same way too, so that's why she left. But she, like Massimo, probably will never know that that's what that was. I take it as that's what it was, just because of that conversation she had with Nina. But maybe not. Maybe it was just that. I feel like it was, like I said, it was all orchestrated. It was on purpose on her behalf, of just like, I'm trying to do right by him and make it, so that Massimo's happy. But I thought it was also interesting too, because he's saying, like, he doesn't outright say that Massimo's going to get fired, because I don't think he is. Because he had made this comment where it's like, John kind of felt like, or at least Nina said that I cared about you more than I did my own son. And he's like, sadly, there was a part of me that wanted, wished that John was more like you, Massimo, which obviously is why the whole betrayal thing hits him even harder and stuff like that. But, it's like, he's like, I've never betrayed you. What I did with the whole Carrie thing wasn't a betrayal, Massimo. I was doing what was best for you. I was doing what you wanted, whether you're just not willing to realize it and admit it yourself, that that's what you wanted, and made your life better. And that's the sad thing, because at the end of the day, you can probably see it from Massimo's perspective, that it's like, oh, I sold the woman I love, I made the devil's bargain. I made a deal with the devil, and I chose a career over love. Like, who knows how things could have worked out, but it's like, once again, because I chose my career over her, she's gone now. We spent 3 years apart, and I never got the chance to talk to her. Once again, in that time frame, he said those few words to her when they met at the beginning of the series, and reunited under those circumstances of, but other than that, and it's a thing of like, she was here she was in the U.S. because she was arrested, and I didn't even know. It's a whole thing. And so obviously we see him at the end of the episode go to Sophia, and I think that's supposed to signify that maybe going forward, Massimo's going to be a lot more about working with her to take down NYL, and just because he's dead set on, it's like, Dominic kind of played his hand, and it's like, all right, I'm going to, how Massimo's going to respond is going to be interesting. Like I was saying, I don't think he's going to fire Massimo, but it's like, you are going to suffer the consequences. Now, what those consequences look like, that's going to be interesting to find out. But it's interesting, too, because they played at the beginning of the episode, but also at the end of the episode, about how Lucifer was God's favorite angel, loved him more than any other angel, and it's supposed to be representative of, which is so interesting because that puts... that's kind of making, even though he's kind of, but the whole thing, it's interesting how you bounce back and forth, because the way Massimo kind of paints it in some of the monologue, it makes you think that, hey, the devil is actually dominant, but the whole thing is the devil is actually you the entire time. The devil's greatest trick is making you not realize that he's there, that you are the devil, you're not realizing it. So, but it's interesting because Massimo, it's like, oh, I'm the devil, I rebelled, and now I'm basically getting cast out of heaven with all my demons, basically, It's interesting the parallel that he's creating in that regard, because once again, you would think from the parallels of everything that Dominic would be the devil, but Massimo is. I mean, that's kind of something he's struggling in, at least, because it makes you wonder, voiceover wise, where Massimo is storyline. Is that him at the end of the season going back retelling this whole thing? Is that what the story is? Are those things that he's thinking, is it kind of narratively like Final Fantasy X? Spoilers for Final Fantasy X, just a little spoilers. That basically the entire series, 90% of the game is Titus, basically retelling everything from the beginning of the game till Xanarkin, the entire game, and then every once in a while you get a monologue from Titus. It's him looking back at everything in retrospect, and I think that's what Massimo is doing now. Now, where time frame wise this is, whether this is simply at the end of the season or whether this is years in advance, those questions. But I'm really curious to ultimately see where all this is up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, like to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.